So I've just been to the ASUS stand at IFA and I started drilling the staff with some very difficult questions, and they didn't want to or didn't know how to answer them until they brought in Sasha, and then I drilled him until I got some very interesting answers about some of the secrets of ASUS's manufacturing thinking behind of all the products. Why are they making this like that, and why are they not making certain things like that? And now I'm going to share them with you. Licensing Windows is cheap and easy with whokeys.com, and if you use the code TN20 you get an extra discount. Complete the purchase, copy the key and paste it to the activation settings, and you're all done. Also check out their Microsoft Office 19 license and use the same code TN20 for the extra discount. Check out whokeys.com in the video description below. So the first question I asked Sasha was haptic touchpads. Where have they gone? Why don't we have them anymore? If you remember the ProArch StudioBook 16, then that one had haptic touchpad, and I believe there was another model which was ZenBook Pro X potentially that had haptic trackpads. And I was saying all the laptops that I'm seeing here don't have haptic touchpads. They have, the hinged touchpads that aren't as good, as sensitive, as responsive as some of the, trackpads that we've seen from Apple, for example. And the answer is very interesting. Number one, the reason why you don't have haptics in a lot of the laptops is because ASUS wants to make them slimmer. Apparently, if you want to mount the haptic motors underneath the touchpad, it's going to have to be a little bit thicker than usual because you have the battery pack just underneath the touchpad. The other reason is the manufacturing cost. Not necessarily because they are worried that this is going to make the product more expensive, but in order to actually mount the motors underneath the touchpad, they're going to have to split the battery like Apple does with their MacBook devices. They're going to split the battery all over the device. But ASUS wants to use the same battery bank that they have on VivoBook S, for example, on a ZenBook S or some kind of a ProArch PX13. If you can reuse a certain part on other product SKUs, that's obviously going to keep the production cost of the product down. Now, in my opinion, I think ASUS should definitely consider having some haptic models on some of their higher end products because it is so much better. I would rather have 1 to 2 millimeter difference on the laptop thickness and actually have a haptic trackpad or touchpad than not have it, or at least have an option where I could add it in certain models. I would love to see that. Apparently another interesting thing I found out is that the trackpads can have different kind of surfaces, either glass or plastic. There's a bit of a fancier way of the plastic, but in essence they're them too. You can make the plastic a bit more rigid, but the feel of even the hinge touchpads will be different, whether it's glass, because it will be a bit more solid and heavier click compared to some of the plastic clicks. The second very difficult question I asked was, hey, where the heck is upgradable RAM? All the laptops I see here, none of them you can upgrade RAM. What's going on with here? Are we going Apple route? I thought Windows and ASUS, that's what we're trying to do. Be a bit more environmentally friendly and offer upgrade options or user upgradable options. Apparently no. And here's the answers. So there are 3 CPU manufacturers, Qualcomm, AMD and Intel. Qualcomm doesn't have support for SODIMM slots, which means that it's going to have to be on the board. So that's not necessarily ASUS's fault, it's Qualcomm's fault. Now Intel with their Lunar Lake has exactly the same issue or problem. In fact, they actually have the RAM on the CPU package, exactly like Apple did with their devices. You have the CPU and the RAM is soldered right next to it. But that actually introduces one downside for creators, which is the total capacity support for RAM, which now only can be 32 gigabytes because you can't have two 32 gigabyte chips that you can put next to the CPU. When it comes to AMD, then apparently AMD actually recently released support for also SODIMM slots or SODIMM memory support with their Ryzen AI 300 series CPUs. But I said, well, why don't you have it then? Because if you look at the ProArt StudioBook, for example, even that is soldered on. And the reason for that is because AMD actually took their time making support for the SODIMM. Making memory support is a lot different whether you're making support for onboard memory or SODIMM slots. Apparently, it's very, very different. In Sasha's words, it is like making support on a CPU for DDR5 and DDR6. It takes time. And by the time when ASUS wanted to launch their laptops, you know, like the ProArt series and ZenBook, VivoBook series, AMD hadn't released support for SODIMM slots. So they just released the laptops with just, you know, the memory on the board. But now, interestingly, we will probably start to see some Ryzen AI 300 series devices coming to the market that will have SODIMM slots. Also, this might be obvious to you, but having the RAM soldered onto the board will obviously make the RAM faster. Well, you can run the RAM faster. Also, if it's closer to the CPU, like on one package, you can make the RAM run even faster. And I guess everyone wants faster RAM. Next, we have a very interesting statement. Did you know that the ZenBook S15 has 3 different CPU manufacturers? There is a model, same model that has AMD CPU, same model that has Intel CPU, and the same model that has Qualcomm CPU. And I said to Sasha, how the heck does ASUS market these? How do you put them out there? Like, what? You know, you don't see Apple do that. Here's a MacBook Pro with Intel CPU and AMD's and Nvidia and our own. Why would they do that? Why? Apparently the answer to that is that ASUS likes to provide a product catalog that then the local regions can choose from and then just choose which product they like more. Because if you look at the history of Asian market, for example, then you can see that they prefer Intel. And if you go there with AMD platform, apparently even when offering lower end price or product that's even better, it still isn't as well received as an Intel device. So to Asia, for example, Intel devices will be supported, but then, you know, North America or Europe market, they can actually choose whether they want a Qualcomm or AMD or Intel device. So ASUS provides the options and then the local regions are choosing from there. Next is about keyboards. Now, all the keyboards are the same switches, they're the same, but they feel different. Why do they feel different? How is this possible? What's going on? Apparently, the biggest difference that makes the keyboards feel different is the chassis flex. All the different chassis have some kind of flex, whether more or less, or what's underneath, how the cooling feels there, how they're attached together. And that makes the keyboard feel different and gives the best or worst feel for you. Some people like it very hard. Some people like them a little bit more spongy, some very hard travel, like mechanical keyboard and so on. But apparently the chassis flex is one of the biggest contributors to that. And the interesting thing is now we have some of the laptops from ASUS that have removable keyboards, like the ZenBook Duo and the PZ13 from ProArt that have detachable keyboards. Now I've got some interesting discoveries. When you put the keyboard on a different surface, even when you have it on the table, putting it on the mouse mat, for example, will give you a lot different typing experience on the ZenBook Duo, for example, than just having it straight on a hard table or having it on your lap or having it on a different surface. If you like it, just choose the surface you put it on and you can have a different feel keyboard. Interesting. Battery life. I asked them which one of these devices has the best battery life. And apparently it's the device that you probably have never heard of. The best battery life that ASUS hasn't got the Qualcomm CPU, hasn't got the AMD Ryzen CPU. It's actually the new Intel Lunar Lake CPU, which is in the ASUS ExpertBook P5 device. That one has the largest battery and has very clever technology as well to make this CPU run the longest. There's some crazy 27-hour battery life metrics that you can see there, which is insane. So that was a surprise to me. And the last question was about chargers. There are so many different chargers that ASUS has. 240 watt, 200 watt, 100 watt, 65 watt, USB Type-C, barrel plug, and then a new plug that ASUS has invented. I said, why are you reinventing the wheel? Why don't you just make all the, laptops have USB-C charging? Because there is 240 watts USB-C chargers out there. But apparently the answer is not so simple. When you have a USB-C charger, there is a lot of power loss in the charger because USB-C was never meant to be a charger. It was a design of a data transfer, but then power delivery was a later feature, if that makes sense. Which means that when you have a 240 watt USB-C power brick, it actually delivers, I don't know, 20% less, according to some of the experts there, to the device, which means that there's a huge power loss and we're still not getting the full performance that they want to give the laptop. Secondly, the power plug versus the new ASUS invented power plug that is reversible, but a little bit slimmer, a little bit different. The reason why they're removing the power plug now from the future devices is because then they can make the devices slimmer and the new plug takes less space, which makes the laptop slimmer. I like that. And the new plug can still deliver 240 plus watts of power and is still very power efficient. The other question I said is, why don't you make a power brick that has detachable USB-C cable so that it can be reused on another devices, or it's a little bit more portable? That's because it is cheaper to manufacture these devices, and if you start to offer a device that can have removable USB-C cable, not all of the USB-C cables can support certain powers and there's different certifications, but to make it simpler, just use the included power brick and that's it. Although I would love to see this area reinvented the most. Please make some kind of unified charger that is the same, that can offer power delivery and data delivery. I know that sometimes you take up the USB-C port, but hey, if you're actually clever, you can figure out a way to add a power plug that has USB-C passed through, for example. So you're not actually removing the port from the laptop, but just, charging the laptop, and then you still have USB-C. If you had a chance to ask any very difficult questions from ASUS, what would it be? I'd love to know from you.